All right, what's up, guys? I just want to introduce you guys to an OG in the footwear industry. He goes by the name of Rob Purvy. You know, super interesting. I can't wait to sit here and get a good story. You know, we talked a little bit the other day. We met at what was it?
One of the trade shows. Right?
One of the trade shows out there in Vegas. You know,
Yeah.
but finally got to talk a little bit a couple days ago. Super interested. You know, went online, researched you. I'm just excited to sit here and talk and listen to your stories. So let's introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, where you were born, and we'll start from there and wrap it all around to where you're at now with TCG.
Sure. I'm Rob Pervy, and I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's where I was born and raised.
Okay.
Lived in Philadelphia until I was in my mid-20s. And, I had I think a very typical, what I consider city upbringing.
Right.
You know, growing up in the city, came out of a phenomenal household. So things were really focused in terms of the priorities that I think that most parents would have for their children.
Right.
Even though I grew up in a city that a lot of people consider a pretty tough city.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so growing up and stuff, were you always interested in like sneakers and fashion? And I mean, you said you're from Philly.
Yes.
So how did living there influence a lot of your style, your ambition to create and stuff like that?
Tremendously.
Really?
I think a lot of it just came from coming from I wasn't in an impoverished background, but it was a challenging situation.
Okay.
Where people have things that you don't have.
Right.
Played a lot of sports, music, art, sports, and academics was the most important thing in my household.
Okay.
And growing up there and playing a lot of sports and being around that culture,
Right.
I didn't necessarily always have the coolest shoes. And probably the best way to describe my experience there was, once I started being okay at sports, I remember thanking my mom, and she said, "Why are you thanking me?" And I was like, well, if I didn't have what we used to call in Philadelphia bobos,
Right.
which bobos are, sneakers that you get from like the supermarket.
It's just like a regular everyday little
bobos.
Right.
Okay.
I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's an East Coast thing. I actually
Okay.
looked it up now that we have the ability to research stuff. But
Yeah.
it's a term that was really coming from the mid-Atlantic, the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. But if somebody just came up to you and said, "Yo, you rocking bobos right now," you're having a bad day.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're calling you out on them.
Yeah. So with that being the case, I really worked hard on working hard so I could, afford to buy some Chuck Taylors myself.
Yeah.
Because in my era when I was growing up, Chucks was one of the few shoes that kind of helped you elevate. And I thanked her because I had to play sports in bobos, and since I was being clowned, I think I worked a little harder at my craft.
Right.
So, you might have on some Chucks, but I just bust you.
Right.
So,
Right.
so it was one of those type of things, And I stayed really focused on those four things that I talked about earlier, which was it was unacceptable in my household not to pursue at least a few of them, if not all of them.
Right. Now, so what was your favorite pair of shoes growing up? Like, you said you had the Chucks, but was there a pair of shoes that you always wanted to, buy? Like,
Yeah. I think a lot of the influence came from the people that I looked up to that were like my heroes.
Right.
Chucks was a thing that happened because the people in my immediate community, that was like the primary brand. I
Right.
would say what Nike is today is what Converse and Chucks was back in that era. I always assumed when I was a kid that Chuck Taylor was a basketball player. And he did play basketball, but he was a Converse employee, like way back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So, that was what I really wanted. My first pair of Chucks that I got was actually for Christmas. So that was
no way.
a great Christmas.
Yeah.
I can't even remember anything else I got that Christmas.
How old were you?
I was about 9.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Opening a box of Chuck Taylors and just like, wow.
Yeah, because I wanted PF Flyers before that, because then there was another brand called PF Flyers,
Yeah.
which I think New Balance owns them now.
Do they?
Yeah. But PF Flyers, they make you run faster and jump higher.
Dude, that's that.
You know what I mean? So, and when you're like 6, 7 years old, that's what it's all about. But again, you can't market and tell those type of stories today.
Yeah.
So, it was a really interesting situation. And, as time went by, you know, I started getting little part-time jobs and things like that, and I kind of took that responsibility off my mom, and I started buying it myself. And Adidas was probably the first brand after Converse that really meant a lot to me.
Right.
And that's because Muhammad Ali wore Adidas.
We were talking about that the other day when you said not a lot of people know that Muhammad Ali, that's what he fought in, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's crazy.
Absolutely. And I learned way later that Jesse Owens was wearing Adidas when he competed in Germany. So that kind of reinforced that for me. And then the guy who still has the most points in the history of basketball, which is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for the majority of his career, he wore Adidas as well.
Damn.
So, and I was glad when I finally found out that the initial, real, true pronunciation is Adidas.
We learn something new every day. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Adolf Dassler is the person who founded the brand many, many, many years ago, and his nickname was Adi. His last name is Dassler, so Adi Das.
Put it together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Even though when I was a kid, we used to say all day I dream about sports. When our parents were around, and when they weren't around, we used to say all day I dream about, and you can figure out.
All right, we all know what the last one.
Go.
I think that still goes on today, man.
No
Even my little siblings, cousins, they say the same thing. They're like all day I dream about.
Yeah.
No
doubt.
So growing up, you said you had like jobs just to purchase some sneakers or whatever. What were some of the jobs you had? Like, was it just little odd jobs? Or?
Man, I had odd jobs. It was a maintenance job. I remember probably the one that I tell the story about the most is I was working really young, not that strong, kind of small, and we were actually working at an auction place where these huge rugs from South America were auctioned to the people who were well-to-do enough to be able to participate in the auction.
Yeah.
And you had to go up on this ramp, and you would have to take these really big rugs, and you had to flip them down, and they got to roll down like that, and you got to put that little thing in it, so, and I was just going, because I wasn't big enough and strong enough to do it like that. And that was something that, you got to do what you have to do. And that was all part of the path. But what really kind of changed things around for me, that passion for footwear led me to eventually working at a Foot Locker.
Okay.
And
so you kind of had to learn from the heavy lifting type of job, and then you realized, did you not want to do that the rest of your life? You just said
no. I was trying to figure it out because I went to school, had a pretty good education and all of that stuff, but this dream of being a professional athlete clearly wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. So going back to sports, so you did play ball.
Yeah, typical. I played football and basketball and messed around with a little bit of martial arts and all that type of stuff. And that was me and my crew, my boys, and I was really fortunate that I kind of through school I met a family that everyone had the same principles that my household had. So my mom agreed with me hanging out with these dudes, and I think hanging out with them, which they're still my close friends to this day. Some of them are family now because with some marrying of family members and all of that type of stuff. I'm considered a part of their family, and they're a part of my family, and that really kind of, I guess to a degree, protected me from the worst parts of the streets of a tough city to grow up in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of stories. It's like people, growing up in Philly, a lot of people have the same, any tough neighborhood where you're like, you experience certain things and you kind of want to get out or something like that.
Yeah,
was that always the case, or you loved Philly?
Yeah, no, I love Philly. I love Philly, and I wouldn't want to be from anywhere else. But I think around 4th and 5th grade when they teach geography, I really started getting interested in the world. So my mother told me later after I started traveling that she knew when I was born that I wasn't meant to just stay in that town. She kind of sensed that I had this global perspective. And I liked a lot of things like that when I was a kid. One of the things I aspired to be when I was real young, I wanted to be an astronaut. And when I found out that I sucked at math, I had to kill that idea. And the first African-American astronaut in America is from my hometown as well.
Wow.
So, so that was kind of inspirational to know that someone could do that.
From your area.
Yeah. So, that was really cool, just being around those inspirational type of examples and being around a lot of inspirational people. So when I was working at Foot Locker, I was in one of the very few urban Foot Lockers, because generally Foot Locker would be more in a, I guess you would say, more mainstream environment, because there used to be a shoe store before then. It was a shoe store many, many years ago called Kenny Shoes.
Right.
And that was the same ownership of Kenny Shoes, was the ownership of the founders of Foot Locker. It's all changed now because we're talking a long time ago.
Right, right.
And a lot of reps from the brands used to visit my store. And I was always intrigued by that. So I would speak to the reps and they would ask me questions about trends and what's selling and what's going on. And I would actually just answer them and tell them what was going on, and then ask them about what it's like to work in sneaker companies. Because I never even envisioned or thought about that.
Right.
And one day my Reebok rep came by and announced that she was moving in-house, taking a corporate position. And I asked her who was going to replace her. And she had what they called a field service rep job. And she didn't know, and I asked her to put my name in.
So is that how everything kind of transpired? You
Yeah.
started, I know you work for a lot of major companies. I did a little bit of research, whatever, but so you started at Reebok?
Yes, as a field service rep.
As a field service rep, wow.
Yeah, which some people call it a tech rep.
Okay.
There's a few names out there. Certain brands actually come up with their own, description of that.
Right.
But you're really, I guess, to really make a long job description short, you pretty much are the eyes and ears of the brand in whatever region they assign you to, and you actually are the ambassador for the brand on a local level. Wow. And a lot of times when someone corporate comes to your region, it's on you to show them around. And, so that was, I had, my territory was Pennsylvania over to Penn State, going south through Delaware, all of New Jersey, and occasionally I used to have to go up to New York with help with functions, because it is New York.
New York, especially being in Reebok, you had to be up in New York.
Yeah, so I had to do that. So that was what I did. I did that for less than 2 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when I would go into quarterly, we would go into headquarters. Right. I'll bring all the field service reps in, and at the end of our updates and us downloading and all of the different things they had on the agenda, they would actually talk about different opportunities in the company. And I heard about an opportunity that I raised my hand immediately, and they thought that I didn't know what I was raising my hand for, because I raised my hand straight up right away, because they were talking about opportunities for people to move to Asia and learn manufacturing and work in the factories.
Yeah. So I know you have a lot of expertise in, like you said, manufacturing and stuff like that. So you ended up going to Asia.
Yes.
When did that whole stuff come about? So how long were you out there for? How did you end up going to Asia, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, at the end of the meetings, they would kind of go through a list of different opportunities, because the field service position at that company at that time, and for most companies, is a gateway for you to actually start to move up. Because they would talk about sales jobs, the usual things. And at the end, the gentleman who started my career, who's really super close friend of mine still to this day, because you have to pay it forward and also pay homage to those who
pave the path for you.
Yeah. So at the end, he would say, "Oh, and they're looking for people to move overseas." But he used to hype the other jobs as more exciting, because he had a sales background. So they were like, most people want to go in sales or marketing. Right. And they said, when they looking for people to move overseas, and I'm down. And I think part of it was my passion for footwear. And when I was 6 years old, I remember this like yesterday, I saw this guy on TV. Kind of changed my life.
Really?
It was Bruce Lee.
Wow. So what did he do?
I was like, I would get to move to Asia, and I've always had an infatuation, because Bruce Lee had that much impact on me when I first saw him.
Okay.
Just the whole swagger, the whole
he had the whole demeanor to him was just great, man.
So I kept telling them that if they looking for somebody to go, I'm down. Yeah. And eventually, it took about 6 months or so for
that whole process to go through.
Yeah, for that to go down, and I ended up moving to Busan, South Korea.
Yeah. So you were in Busan, South Korea. Where else did you?
Well, I was there for about 2 years. Okay. And then I got promoted, and I moved to Bangkok, Thailand. And so I was there for about 2.5 years.
How was that over there? Was it?
It was amazing.
A good time.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a challenge in some ways, but at the same time, I think it kind of fulfilled this dream I always had of kind of seeing the world, and being paid for it.
I mean, that's all you got to do.
It's cool, and I was able to take my family. I was married at that time.
Okay.
I got married during that whole transitional process.
Oh wow! So you had met your wife right now back before
Before I went overseas.
Overseas.
Yeah.
When did you guys meet out in Philly?
Yes.
Oh, so hometown?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
You guys didn't happen to go to high school together, did you?
No, we didn't. We went to high schools that were kind of rival high schools, but we had a lot of friends in common because Philly's kind of a small, big city.
Yeah.
So, you know, my high school wasn't too far from hers, so, and we knew a lot of people in common. And, you know, when we got married, we both had children already, and then we had children together, so, you know, it kind of worked out really well. And all those people are like grown-up people, so shout out to them. Shout out to everybody. I don't even want to start naming names because then we would take up the whole rest of this time naming names. So, but you know, I love my family, and I'm really fortunate that they love me too. So
you guys have kids? It's how many?
We actually have 4.
So 4 total kids?
Yeah.
All boys?
No, 3 girls and a boy.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So they all into the whole sneaker culture too, or?
Well, to a degree, you know, I think we all wear sneakers. So,
right. Yeah. Are they like? Would you? Because I know you had your definition of a sneakerhead. So would you consider them
sneakerheads?
Sneakerheads.
My son, yes.
Okay.
And I think that I would probably call my other children sneaker aficionados, but not necessarily sneakerheads.
Okay.
But I would say my son is definitely, he knows, you know, I think just because of the guy thing, and we talk about it all the time, and he doesn't know life without it because I was involved with it far before he was born.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then touching up on the sneakerhead definition, we talked about this. We had a good laugh at it, but what is your definition of a sneakerhead?
Well, for me, it's a little different because I think my path is different than a lot of sneakerheads because I have a lot of respect for all of the really well-known sneakerheads that are out there. I love what they talk about. I love what they do. But I was really fortunate to be able to actually go to Asia, live over there, and learn manufacturing and learn about product development and commercialization and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that makes me like a super sneakerhead because I sacrificed you know, almost like a person who goes into the military because I had to move and live in a foreign country, and I had never been out of the country before when I accepted the responsibility of going overseas.
Yeah, so that was the first time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Longest plane ride of my life.
How long is that flight?
It felt like a month, but
right.
I do it a lot now, so it's a lot different. But the first time you do it,
it's for sure.
Yeah.
So you were out there with Reebok.
Yes.
And so there's one thing I wanted to touch up on was we talked about the whole Allen Iverson situation.
Oh, that.
So I want to touch up a little bit about that.
You want to talk about that? Oh,
yeah.
Well, you know, when I moved back, I actually was a product development manager in one category, and at that time, our company had about 20 different categories. So you had, you know, I guess you would say micro businesses that was in all of those categories.
Right.
So in the beginning, I was part of what they call SMUs, so special makeups.
Yeah.
And the owner of the company didn't like that term because the culture was if you have to give a company a special makeup, that means you didn't do your work properly in preparing what you need to make for consumption.
Right.
So when they told me I was involved with SMUs, I didn't want to be on his wrong side without him really even knowing me. Yeah. So me and to this day, a really close friend of mine, we had to work in this thing together. And we said, man, so we don't want to say SMU, so how about if we said we were cool dudes. That's what we kept saying to each other. Yeah. But we kept saying CFD, so you can only guess what the word F is. So we kept saying cool dudes, cool blank dudes. And then we said, wait a minute, custom footwear department is what I said.
So that was your take on that word?
No, he said, that's not cool enough. He said, how about custom footwear division? And it was only 2 of us. So instead of saying SMUs, we started saying CFD.
So you guys made your own
little.
People
love acronyms.
Yeah,
man. So that was almost like we was in the FBI or something. Yeah. And what ended up happening is the CFD duo, which eventually became a department. We were the ones that, if you came back from a presentation and some portion of your line is disliked, we would come in almost like a SWAT team.
Okay.
And we would come in and just try to give you something to replace what needed to be dropped.
Okay.
And after a while, when it was successful, we started being asked to come in. So we would sit in to presentations of all categories and take notes.
Right.
And what ended up happening was, and you fast forward a few years, because we did some really cool stuff before Iverson came. But you know, obviously he's Iverson.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the time Iverson came, I had actually moved up a little bit. I had a little bit of responsibility, and I wasn't necessarily involved day to day. And my primary responsibility was to make sure that the people who worked on it didn't have any other distractions.
So they were just strictly focused on that one project.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people that tell a lot of stories about it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm one of the few people that tell the actual story, because people say, "Oh, you're the Iverson guy," and yes, I can say I was, but I wasn't the one who did the stuff, because I was already kind of, I can't remember if I was a director or a group leader or something like that.
So you were a little higher up.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. You know, I had already been through a few wars. And,
yeah, you did your time.
Yeah, and I had already worked with Shaquille, because Shaquille came into the league far before him.
Right,
and,
right.
You know, things have changed because time goes by, but I would say there's probably 3 guys that you can say have had so much hype before the NBA. Shaquille was definitely the first one, that the hype about him was so huge before he came into the NBA. And I think the next person with hype at that level was LeBron. And we're living through the next guy right now.
Yep.
Well, Zion, of course.
Yep.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Zion, he's killing it right now.
Yeah, so to live through that stuff. So for me, when I think back to the blessings that I've had in terms of all of the different athletes that I've been around, that Iverson experience is great. It was phenomenal, but I don't downplay the Shaquille thing.
Right.
Yeah, the Shaquille thing was huge, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously the Iverson thing. But after that, shortly after the question, which was the first Iverson signature shoe, I actually moved on to Adidas and was, you know, there for Kobe Bryant.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that whole Kobe era.
Yeah, Kobe. When I got there, it was Kobe, T-Mac.
Wait, so Kobe was part of the Adidas?
Yes, for 8 years.
Oh no way! I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Shoe, which.
Cause my sneaker knowledge is, I have some, but it's not to that extent.
Yeah.
So so how he was there for how long, you say? 8 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wasn't even there that long, but he was there.
Okay.
For 8, yeah. So that was a great experience as well.
Yeah.
And that shoe is in some level of rotation
Somewhere.
as well. You know, right now. So to be part of 2 shoes that are basketball shoes that are not Nike shoes, I think is pretty cool.
That's it. No, yeah. 'Cause Paul, like I said, Paul was telling me about the whole the Iverson shoe and what was I gonna say? Because what are the silhouettes? Or are they called the? I remember it's the question.
That's the first one.
Okay, and then the answer.
Then the answer.
All right, because his nickname.
During the answer's life is when I left and went to Adidas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then was involved over there with some pretty cool stuff with them as well.
What kind of stuff were you involved with, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, probably it was Superstar Millennium was probably the biggest one in terms of volume at that time, because you know, we were coming into the millennium.
Right.
You know, 2000s was rolling in.
Yeah.
And you know, the lifestyle aspect of basketball and the performance aspect was kind of different. So we actually put a compression molded midsole on what we call the shell toe, and then put that shoe on guys in the NBA.
Yeah.
So that kind of, you know, just created another extension of Adidas basketball when the brand was, you know, obviously not competing as intensely as it could have been in terms of what was going on in basketball at that time. So, you know, we had some really cool guys at that point. You know, we had Tim Thomas, who was a very good player, didn't necessarily transcend into like a name that you reference from yesteryear, but he was a really good player. And we had Tim, and we had Kobe, we had Antoine Walker, Tracy McGrady. So we had like what we were calling like some young guns at that time. So that was really cool stuff.
So who were some of the you know, coolest guys you got to hang around with? Like, who were some guys that you can consider like really close and stuff like that?
Oh, the people in my family.
Yeah.
You just asked me about cool dudes. So yeah.
No, I mean some like NBA players you gotta some NBA players you gotta, you know, work with and stuff. Like who were some of the best?
Well, I was really fortunate because I got a chance to interact with, you know, some to a smaller degree, but I had a chance to interact with like to all of the names.
Okay.
You know, not Iverson so much because again, I was
Little.
yeah. But I was very instrumental in making sure that that team was put in a position to do what they had to do, because I think at the same time, a lot of things that people don't talk about today is to understand who's good at what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like being on a team. You have
Right.
to know how to delegate, you know, and I always tell people this. When you get a championship ring playing any sport, if you're on the team, everybody gets rings.
That's true.
So at the end of the day, when you look in history, if you got a ring, you're a champion. And I think a lot of times people kind of lose sight of that. Is I'd rather be coming off the bench on a championship team than being the primary guy on a team that doesn't even make the playoffs.
Right, and you can say that for a lot of guys right now in the NBA too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's,
So philosophically, I'm just trying to win championships.
yeah. So you can put the best team around you,
Yeah,
make sure they're dialed in.
And then you figure that when the deck is kind of stacked, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not working at the biggest company that's, you know, the dominant factor even to
Right.
this day, but I still got a couple wins.
Yeah.
You know?
And then, right. And then you in the past being able to do all these different jobs within, because you did what, manufacturing, you said, or you worked production?
Well, that's a good point, because I think that you know, I've been really blessed to have a lot of great friends and a lot
Right.
of people that I consider family that are in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I think unlike a lot of people, I didn't stay necessarily in one discipline.
Right.
So, you know, to start off, I guess you could say to a degree in retail sales, you know, like literally working in sneaker stores.
Right.
And then from there to go to manufacturing, and then from manufacturing to go to product development, and then from product development go into different disciplines within branding, and touch all of those various areas was probably me learning, but at the same time working, at the same time teaching, and at the same time moving up and expanding my quiver.
Yeah, and I feel like that definitely can give you an upper hand on getting the right people around you, because you know, if you know certain parts of everything, you can, you know, teach everybody a little bit. And
if I don't know, I know somebody that does.
That does. So then there you go.
So, yeah,
and there you go.
You know, so and then I think that, and it's really important. I always tell folks that I think is really none of us are hatched. You know, what I notice a lot of times about certain individuals who are really successful, when they get to have these type of conversations, you think they were hatched, because they don't talk about who put them in a position and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just really grateful that I've been in a situation where it's been people who believed in me and gave me a chance. And you know, and I just try to make sure. I told a really good friend of mine who was an employer, I said, my job is to make sure that you sleep well at night.
That's true. Yeah.
And that kind of sums it up.
Yeah.
You know, so, but after the experience with Adidas, which was relatively short, I was able to be a part of the very first e-commerce sportswear brand ever.
Which was?
It was called Dunk.net.
Dunk.net. And
Yeah.
what you guys, it was mainly direct to consumer?
It was only direct to consumer.
Obviously.
And it was way before that was a practice. And
So
I think that's partly why it didn't have sustainability, because we thought, and God bless my homies and family members that started this thing with me, we thought that we were only a couple of years ahead of the curve, when in reality we were many years ahead of the curve. But we had some great athletes that, you know, supported us by being a part of it. But we had Shaquille O'Neal.
Okay.
We had Oscar De La Hoya.
Oh, wow.
We had Mike Piazza and Rebecca Lobo.
Wow.
So
So you guys had some top athletes.
And at that time, you got to put yourself in the time frame of what was